You ever have one of those moments where you are reading through a book that you're kind of enjoying, and then at one point you're like, yeah, duh, this is what you do. This is how you do the thing. I had that moment when it came to Culture Renovation, which was written by my guest today. I can't wait for you to learn more. Hold on. This is Relationships at Work, the Employee Experience and Workplace Culture podcast. Welcome to the show where we're trying to wake up the workplace. I don't just say that because I love alliteration. I am actually hoping we move the needle when it comes to improving leadership, workplace cultures, employee experience, employee engagement, internal communication, all the things that we all know we can do better at because the people we're serving deserve that. And you're one of those people. Before I start talking about our guest today, which, it's a good one. It's a really, really good one. I want to thank you for listening. And it's a milestone again. We just wrapped up a year, but now we've moved into the 50th episode. Yep, this episode is the 50 of the podcast. And I want to thank you for letting me share the brains of these amazing guests. I feel like I'm extremely lucky in that I get to learn every week. I get to learn something new. I get to be a sponge. I feel like I'm going to school. I'm going back to school basically every week. And thank you for coming along the ride with me and expanding your brain as well. I think it's kind of cool that these wonderful people and generous people will take their time to sit down and share their experience, what they know, what they've learned, and all to help us enjoy our workspace better. If you're curious about all things relationships at work, I encourage you also to check out Raw Notes, which is my weekly note I pass along to you every week. Just go to russellolacher.com. That's RUSSELLOLACHER. And right there, top right, get Raw Notes and sign up and ta-da, done and done. But we're not done because we have so much more show to go. Kevin Oakes is the guest today for the 50th episode. Thrilled. It's a special episode, so you know what? Pretty special guest. Not that all of them haven't been amazing and special. But Kevin wrote a book that I told off the top about having that moment where it's like, yeah, this is the book. And that's exactly what I took away. 18 steps to improving workplace culture. And I'm not going to sell the book here for you. I'm not making any money off doing that. Not that, I'm not selling the thing, but I will say I couldn't recommend this book more. It definitely sort of shifted the needle for me on how to approach an organization's culture and how to actually change that culture. There's always something you can learn. And I just really love how he packaged his research, Kevin, in this book. And we're going to get into the book, his experiences, and what he's learned from writing the book. And it's a treat. Here we go. And on the show today, we have Kevin Oakes. And here is why he is awesome. He's the international keynote speaker. He is one of those. He's a CEO and co-founder of the Institute for Corporate Productivity, henceforth to be named I4CP, the world's leading HR research firm. He's the author of Culture Renovation, a blueprint for action, 18 leadership actions to build an unshakable company. It's all based on his research on company culture. One of the big reasons I'm talking to him today, because I'm a big fan of that book. He's been a pioneer in the human capital field for the past 25 years. And a fun fact I dug up on Kevin that I was really excited to share, he is on the board of Best Buddies Washington. He started the chapter in Washington itself, a nonprofit dedicated to establishing a global volunteer movement that creates opportunities for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And now I get to talk to him. Hi, Kevin.
Hey, Russ. How are you?
I'm really, really good. Thanks for being here. So I got to start the question I ask every single one of my guests, which is, what's your best or worst employee experience?
I've been running companies for a long time, so I haven't been, a quote unquote employee of others, during that time. So, I mean, I'm an employee of the companies that I run, and certainly of the company today. And I think the thing that I enjoy the most in our culture and in the company overall is our transparency as a culture. I run our organization, as I did my previous one, on an open book management philosophy, where every single month we get together as a company and we go over all the financials of the organization. So every employee knows how we're doing versus our plan, how we're doing versus last year. We've taught them all what EBITDA means, and they have a very good understanding of where we need to improve and what we've done well. And that aspect, I think, is just one of my favorite, because everybody is an owner in the company. I want to treat them like owners. I want them to act like owners, and it creates a different kind of atmosphere. And as a quote unquote employee of my own company, I appreciate that aspect.
It's also such a reward too, because it's something you obviously instigate, but then it's not a right away thing, because a lot of employees are like not used to that kind of transparency. So it is a little eye opening and a little, is this for real? Should I be believing this is actually happening? And how has the benefits been as you've implemented it over time?
Yeah, I think people know it's real, for sure. I think it just prevents, as much as we can, we try to prevent anyway, the gossip, the water cooler, kind of stuff that happens. And, I never think that that's very healthy in an organization where there hasn't been good communication and everybody's whispering and, conjuring up the worst of, what might happen going forward. Look at what is happening at Twitter. It's a good example. That it's everything's secretive, right? And I just never think that that's a healthy environment. So I love the openness that we have.
Oh, I'm going to talk and ask you a question about Twitter in a minute. But first,
All right.
in the
Very good.
book, right there in the title, you talk about creating a unshakable company. What does that mean, especially in the realm of culture?
Honestly, I think that's more important than ever. We've seen so many changes happen in the external environment that organizations have to deal with on a regular basis. And most CEOs, they want to make sure I have an agile culture, one that not only isn't afraid of change, but embraces change. And to me, that's what unshakable means, is that you've created a culture that can't be shook by, a global pandemic or any kind of social or political or just incident that happens externally. Your company's going to make it through that. Even within your own industry, if something remarkable has happened in your industry, you're able to continue to innovate and execute. So I think that's what unshakable really means to those CEOs. Is I want a rock solid organization that's going to make it through anything.
When you're looking at culture renovation, a lot of organizations will hear that, or cultural transformation, which we know are two very different things.
Right.
However, they think it is something they have to start. Do you see cultural renovation as something that is always ongoing, like an agile organization where it's continuous improvement? Or is this something they stop and start over time?
It's a little bit of both. I end the book with the comment that you're never done with working on your culture and working to improve your cultural health. As you know, in the book, I talk very glowingly about Microsoft, for example. And Kathleen Hogan, the CHRO, and other HR execs get nervous when I do that, because they feel like, geez, we have so much more to do. And, we are not perfect. We've got a lot to work on in our culture. And so you don't just plant a flag in the ground and declare victory, right? You've got to continue to work on the culture. But when you're trying to initiate a new culture inside the organization, or really make significant changes, there is a pretty significant sort of start period when you do that. It typically is triggered by a new CEO coming on board, or an acquisition, or a series of poor quarters. That's what I see most of the time happen is when it's triggered. But I applaud several companies that I'm working with who decide, when everything is going great, okay, now we need to really, start doing some different things with our culture as we enter into this new world of work. We've got, a lot more remote employees, hybrid employees than we had before. Things are, have changed this past 2-3 year time period. And I think that's a good time to be looking at your culture is when everything seems to be going well. Let's figure out what do we need to do to continue to make sure that happens in the future. So there is a start point, but it's something that you should always be working on, Russ.
So is there not warning signs, or is it some companies may be too far gone by sometimes by those red flags that start popping up? Or is it any time's a good time for this?
There are definite warning signs when a culture is in need of renovation. You see it in the employee experience, you see it in employee sentiment. If you're trending down rapidly, then something has happened inside your organization. I have a great story in the book from Workday, actually, who monitors and measures their culture on a regular basis, something that most good companies do. And they saw a slight downtick at one point in time in some of their engagement scores and other measures that they had. And they immediately went to action. They called other people leaders together, and they found there were a couple of underlying issues that they really needed to address. And I think that's fantastic. I think being on top of your culture from that standpoint makes a heck of a lot of sense. But we're big proponents of ongoing employee sentiment measurement, both internally and externally. There's a lot of things being said about any organization out on Glassdoor or other external sites, and the smart companies are monitoring that as well as what's happening internally, and making sure that those metrics are in line with your expectations. And if you have that sudden downturn, then you've got to make some changes.
What is your feeling on voice of employee? Do you think surveys are the best way to be monitoring what's going on in your organization? Or
There's a variety of different ways you can survey employees, and that's one way to monitor what's going on. I talk about this very early in the book about establishing a listening strategy. And what some of the successful companies have done is made sure that they, from a survey perspective, were having an ongoing measurement of the employee sentiment. You cannot rely on an annual engagement survey to tell you much about your culture. That's a point in time survey, and you'll often get false positives. Something that's big at that time, might not be big 2 weeks later. And that's why ongoing analysis makes sense. I'm a big fan of using technology in this case, such as natural language processing combined with AI, which in larger companies allows you to let employees tell you how they're feeling in their own words, and then using that NLP AI engine to parse it out and to categorize things, so you can really understand, where do we have seemingly big issues, and where are what categories do we need to look further into. It'll also tell you, do we have pockets inside our organization, which is very common, that from a cultural perspective are more toxic than others. So I think the ongoing survey strategy makes sense. Even asking a daily question like Amazon does, I think can be very effective. But then a lot of organizations will do focus groups. They will get together and have just good discussions among peers along with leaders. We had several companies do culture hackathons, right? Just like any kind of hackathon where you get a group of folks together for a period of time to brainstorm and innovate, as a group. I think that can be very effective as well. All of those are helpful in gathering employee sentiment. There's many other ways, but those are some that I outlined in the book itself.
what are your thoughts on anonymous surveys? Because a lot of organizations feel like they can't ask their employees anything without that anonymity. But I'm on the flip side of it going, but then isn't your culture kind of broken if people only feel honest if they don't put their name to anything?
Yeah, I'm a less of a fan of anonymity, more of a fan of confidentiality. I think it's hard to promise anonymity, but because nothing is truly anonymous, right? You can kind of track back to where it came from, but confidentiality is what you should promise and honor when anybody is responding to a survey. So I steer people towards confidentiality more than anything.
I like that. Thanks for that. Your book's really good at, hey, it literally says blueprint in the title. So it's giving you 18 steps to culture renovation. The problem is, as much as tactics are great and amazing, mindset is probably the biggest shift for a lot of people to even pick up your book, to even know that they need it. What are leaders missing right now that they need to get into this world?
I say this to leaders all the time. If you lock yourself in a conference room and decide amongst yourselves as a senior leadership team what's happening in the culture today, you're going to get it wrong. Things are filtered by the time it reaches the senior leadership. And so the real issues are lying far down below at the surface. And that's why that sentiment analysis is so critical. But in the book, we talk also about how do you engage the influencers and energizers throughout the organization. It's very common in any organization. And even when I say this to people, they can picture somebody in their head. There are certain people that you go to for subject matter expertise, but probably just for energy. There are people in your lives in your life that you talk to and you walk away just fired up, energized. They provide a different perspective. And there's the flip side, people that kind of suck the life out of you every time you talk to them. Those influencers and energizers are the people at the ground level that typically know what's happening and have the ear of the workforce. And so when you're trying to change culture, you want to make sure they're on board. They're kind of under the tent. They know what's happening, and they become part of your culture ambassador network. So that to me is sort of a critical component. And I think for senior leaders, the trick here is to continue to listen and pay attention, and not assume that you know what's happening. Like I said, the usual triggers are, you have your attrition has increased significantly lately, or, you've had a couple of bad quarters. You have new leadership come in. Those are the things that are often going to trigger that realization that, hey, maybe we need to really focus on improving the fitness of our culture.
Assumption seems to be a bit of an issue too for a lot of organizations. You mentioned about basically the ONA, the organizational network analysis. How do you start that when you're trying to get those influencers, blockers, and energizers if you're an organization that has never done it before?
So ONA is something that we're big fans of. Again, stands for Organizational Network Analysis. And those influencers that I was referencing, if you ask senior leaders, who are the influencers and energizers in the company, they will only get a small percentage of them right. They tend to think in terms of hierarchy, and so they think of people who are in leadership positions as being the people of influence. But oftentimes those influencers are way buried in the hierarchy. Most of the time they are. And sometimes they're even introverts. They're not extroverts. So they're kind of easy to miss. And so organizational network analysis is a survey technique, although you can also get there by monitoring like Teams or Slack, although I don't necessarily recommend that method. But it's a survey technique to triangulate who are people turning to. And you ask your workforce simple questions such as, who do you need more time from? Who do you spend more time, most of your time with when you're seeking out an answer to an issue, or if you have, some sort of problem that you're looking to get solved? Who do you turn to for energy? And conversely, who de-energizes you? And just through that technique, you can understand who are the people in the center of the beehive, if you will, and then who are the people kind of on the outskirts. So I love it because it can be used in a lot of different ways. I love it for what we're talking about here, to change your culture, because those are the people you want to be your culture ambassadors. But we often use it too, just to find out if you've got really distinct silos in your organization. Do you have entire groups that never communicate or collaborate with others? Are they only talking amongst themselves, which is a very common thing, obviously. We've used it for diversity and inclusion measurement as well, just to see what's happening from a DEI perspective. So there's a whole primer on ONA out on our website for those interested. But I just love that science.
I'll put a link to it in the show notes to give people a little bit more direct access to it. Glad you brought up DEI. Now, I've heard of these groups for different names, but I'd never heard of them as employee resource groups until I read your book. And guess what? It showed up in the news recently when certain Elon Musk abolished all ERGs within the organization he had taken over, which was Twitter.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of looking at, and for those who don't know what ERGs they are usually volunteer, they're usually employee led, and they're aiming to foster a diverse, inclusive workforce within an organization.
Right.
I'm just kind of curious, what the benefit of fostering those are, and why should we be scared if a grand poobah coming in is getting rid of them?
There's so many benefits to ERGs, and they sometimes, so that stands for Employer Resource Group or Employee Resource Group. They sometimes go by the name Business Resource Group, Employee Affinity Group. So there are a lot of different labels that you can apply to them. And it typically is bringing together employees in the organization who have a common interest. It's very common for your Black employees, your Hispanic employees to have their own ERG, but you see it for lots of different segments within the workforce. And you often will have a senior executive sponsor the ERG. We have found it to be a great feeding ground for new leaders, emerging leaders inside the organization. They also have tremendous influence in the organization and can inform the organization of a different perspective that maybe the organization wasn't thinking about, or wasn't thinking about how it impacted a particular group. So we've done a lot of research there, and high performing organizations tend to put a lot more effort, even budget behind ERGs just to improve the health of the organization overall. With Musk, it's hard to see what he's doing right these days at Twitter, but I was really surprised that he just got rid of those ERGs. And actually, they got rid of just a number of people in the DEI group. I just think that's it's not going to serve them well in the long run. I failed to see how it will. My advice to any CEO is don't do what Musk does, and support those ERGs in your company.
Environment's huge when it comes to employee renovation. The problem is a lot of people are overworked, they're burning out. So when an organization comes in and goes, we want to change the culture, tweak it, alter it, however it is, people are just looking at it going, oh, I got more meetings to go to. Oh, I've got, you're adding more to my workload, let me do my work, my subculture is fine. How do you implement things like professional development, learning, to an organization that is probably resistant to culture change like that?
Well, I think learning is one of the biggest components of a healthy culture. If you have a learning culture and have put a lot of time, energy, money into learning, you typically have a pretty healthy organization. Done right, it should energize the culture, not create more burnout. And we've seen in many organizations, they have leaders exhibiting the willingness to learn. They stress the importance of learning, and they even teach. Leaders as teachers is something that some of the highest performing organizations embrace, and they make sure that that's an expectation of new leaders coming in, that they are going to be teaching courses to employees inside the organization. And we've done a whole research study on that and webinars on that topic alone. So I'm a big believer in learning, not only within the organization, but giving employees the opportunity to get degrees, to get certificates outside the organization. I'm on the advisory board of a company called Guild Education, for example, and they do a wonderful job connecting employees to higher ed opportunities with the support of the organization. Because more and more today, as we have this war for talent still happening, a lot of employees, as they look for their next job, they're looking to an organization that will help them develop as an individual. I want to grow my career, and they're choosing employers who are embracing that opportunity. Even if you think about frontline employees, you see that being a big distinction of companies like a McDonald's or a Walmart or even Amazon, who have put a lot of effort into making sure that those frontline employees have educational opportunities available to them. So there's so many benefits from being a learning culture overall that I just think it's a critical component here.
It's funny, I don't think it's mentioned enough how much renovating a culture, focusing on things like you're talking about development and investing in employees, is a competitive advantage. If there's a war on talent, they're going to want to go where they're going to be treated well, not the place that has beige walls and cubicles. Like they're
Yeah, it's all in the employer brand, and more executives are recognizing that we have an employer brand, good or bad, you have one, and so you want to make sure that your employer brand is continuing to improve over time because you want to be a an employer of choice. You want people to want to come work for your organization, and unless you're having them click on a box and sign that we're going to work long hours and be overworked, like Twitter just did. I think you've got to put the effort in to have those opportunities. Development, mobility is another one that I'm a big fan of. That's what employees want these days.
I want to pull out a quote that you said from your book, which was how much you hate talking about performance measurement because everyone has an opinion and it's not based on anything around data or personal observations. But the funny thing is, a lot of people feel that culture is that as well, because it is something everybody has an opinion or they have an idea of what a culture is or when it should be changed or not. So, why is it easier to talk about for you for culture as a whole rather than to talk about things like performance management?
Well, you're right. I mean, everybody does experience culture, and I didn't even define culture in the book because it's something that what it is. You know what the culture is in an organization, good or bad. Performance management, yeah, I did have that sort of tongue-in-cheek comment about it. We've changed the way we've done performance management over time, over and over again, right? We've gotten away from annual reviews and formal ratings to a lot of companies have moved more towards just a good managerial conversations around performance. The problem with that is a lot of managers don't do it, and employees are actually looking for more of a numeric rating on how I'm doing, something a little bit more tangible. So some companies have moved back to doing that. I just think performance management has a lot of opinions because we've all experienced it, and many have experienced it on both sides of the equation. Giving reviews and getting reviews. I guess the simple aspect of it that I dislike is when it boils down to just one person's point of view. I'm always a bigger fan of taking a more objective and making it as objective as possible through 360s and through data that you have around somebody's performance versus a very subjective performance review. And I think that's where you tend to get into trouble inside of organizations. So the point I made in the book about performance management is what we found with companies who were successful in changing their culture. They usually realigned their performance management process to be in alignment with the culture change that they wanted to see. We didn't necessarily recommend a specific way to do performance management. It was really more around the change that companies were making to align the process to what they wanted to see in the culture.
Whose job is this to renovate a culture? Because I mean, leaders will go, yeah, it's mine, totally mine. Oh, but then as soon as it's tasked, like HR will do it. And HR seems to have about 17 other jobs on top of, oh, and I have to do culture too. How is this even resourced properly to be making these changes?
There's no question that the CEO is the owner of the culture inside the organization. So I want to make that statement just flat out. You can't get around that. However, the CEO can't change culture all by him or herself. And that's where HR usually gets involved, right? They're supporting the culture that the CEO has a vision for going forward. But in the book, I talk a lot about creating a co-creation mindset, meaning you're not going to do it alone. You're going to get the help of many others inside the organization to make sure that culture change happens at the ground level. And that's where those influencers and energizers come into play. And throughout the book, as I profiled companies that successfully changed their culture, keep in mind, most companies who set out to do this, they fail. Only about 15% actually succeed. But of those 15%, and I profiled many companies that fall into that bucket, it was pretty clear that this was leader-led, but with a lot of help and cooperation throughout the organization.
So why are there still gaps? How many surveys do we hear where the leaders are like, we have amazing employee engagement? And then you talk to the workers and they're like, we don't even ever see our bosses ever. Or there's the gap with empathy. but you keep hearing about these gaps. I did a keynote the other day and I was going through all these different surveys where there was these huge gaps, and executives like, did you read one survey where there wasn't a gap? I'm like, no. And especially after the pandemic, because suddenly everybody just started waking up around what they were interested in doing and not doing anymore, especially generationally. So
Yeah.
with the pandemic and the change that's all happening now, how have you seen that shift even? Because you wrote this book during the pandemic and released it
Right.
during the pandemic. So what
Mhm.
what is shifting? What are we getting to a better place? Because I know there's the examples you gave in the book, which are phenomenal, but are we really bringing everybody else with us?
Yeah. I think if there's a big gap in perception between employees and management, then you have big problems in your organization, right? You should not have that huge gap. That just tells me that management is not in tune and hasn't done enough sentiment analysis to really know what's happening inside the organization. Now, keep in mind that while culture change is critically important to the overall financial health of the organization, the reason a lot of companies don't spend a lot of time on it is because it's damn hard to do. It's not easy to effectively change the culture of a company. Even my father, who I dedicated the book to, who was the CEO of a bank and then an insurance company years ago. He, after he read the book, he said, when I took over that insurance company, it was 100+ years old. He said the culture was in the woodwork. He's like, I didn't know what to do as CEO to change that because they were just set in their ways. He's now reading the book. I wish I had that book then because I know the steps to take in order to change the culture. But it's not an easy thing to undertake. And I think going forward, as we enter this new era of work, we asked everybody, well, a lot of people anyway, work remotely, on a moment's notice. Everybody just started working remotely, and by and large, that worked. People were productive, and companies figured it out and made it work. As we emerge from that, I'm not a huge fan of the you must be back in the office a minimum of 40 hours a week and in the office 5 days a week, because we trusted employees with their freedom, and employees rewarded that trust. And now a lot of CEOs, I think, don't necessarily have the trust that people are being as productive unless they're in the office. And it's just really a childish way to think about things, in my opinion. I really think 5 years from now, we'll look back on this time period and just laugh at some of the things that we did as organizations, and what some CEOs did with the people of their company. I just think adults want to be treated like adults, and they want to be trusted, and having somebody's butt in a seat is not going to make them necessarily productive.
You've been in this sphere a really long time, 25 years, lots of research done for this book. Did anything surprise you? I mean, the escalation of change has been insane. So I'm just kind of curious if anything was jumped out in a way that you weren't expecting.
Yeah, I think it's how resistant to change some organizations are, which is a little surprising given all the change that's happened. It really is a death knell for many companies. If you're resisting change, then you're going to go the way of Polaroid or famous companies that just never adapted to what was happening out in the environment. So that aspect kind of surprises me. I was very fortunate to have the cooperation of many Fortune 500 CEOs in the book, and just have them share their stories. But just for your audience, Russell, give them a little bit of background on how the book came to be. We did one of the largest studies ever conducted on corporate culture. We had over 7,000 organizations as part of it to really look at, are there commonalities of that 15% that succeed in changing their culture that we could share with others, that others could learn from. And that's the blueprint that you've referenced, that where we had 18 steps. We divided those 18 steps into 3 phases. And using that renovation theme, the phases were plan, build, and maintain. And the reason we use the renovation as a term here rather than transformation is, as we got into the research, it was pretty clear the successful companies, they didn't transform their cultures. They didn't become something completely different from what they were. Instead, they very carefully renovated things that were hard to replace or unique about them. And they renovated just like you would an old house to improve the value for the future. And so that's why that term just became a much more approachable and probably appropriate term for what some of these successful organizations were doing. But the blueprint does read very sequentially, and it's really written for the leaders in the organization to take these 18 sequential steps towards improving the fitness of the overall culture. And I've been thrilled that we have many large companies who are using this as their guide to change their culture. Even large military divisions are using this today, which that was a surprise to me. I did not write it with the military in mind. And I was very pleasantly surprised that I've had to spend a lot of time now with certain segments of the military as they try to learn from the corporate world and how they can change the culture of their groups.
I'm going to wrap you up with the last question I ask everybody, Kevin. And considering you have 18 steps, this might be a little difficult. I need you to boil it down to one. So what's one simple action people can do right now to improve their relationships at work?
We talk a lot about positive intent in our organization, and I think that's something that is missing many times from the discourse in the world today. As we just went through the midterm elections, politics, brings us out quite often in organizations where people assume somebody, is saying one thing, or they assume maybe somebody's undermining them or doing something. So we try to stress positive intent. That's if you start with the assumption that somebody is trying to do something positively, you're going to have a much more respectful environment. And I think respect is a word that we'll see used a lot more in the future as we talk about just good relationships at work overall.
That is Kevin Oakes. He is the CEO and co-founder of Institute for Corporate Productivity. He is also the author of a book I couldn't recommend enough, which is Culture Renovation, 18 Leadership Actions to Build an Unshakable Company. Thanks, Kevin, for being here.
Thanks, Russell. It was fun.